You know, I've never even done my top 10 favourite wrestlers. I've never even written them down.
Oh, it's dead easy. I keep mine on my desk at all times.
But how do you decide the order?
It's Raven.
Adam?
Leave me alone.
You're the king of YouTube lists. How do you do your orders?
Well, you start with 100, obviously, you have to, and then you whittle that down to 25 via a tournament, of course, and then you check it with the average star ratings of Dave Meltzer.
Yeah, okay, I'm bored of that. How about autobiographical? Then the order is me.
It's not what I asked you to do.
It's also really egotistical, like it's about you and not the wrestlers. Like, how do you justify that?
The same way I justify everything I do. With a pop culture reference.
I guess it looks as if you're reorganizing your records.
Yeah.
What is this, chronological?
No.
Not alphabetical.
Nope.
What?
Autobiographical.
No way.
I'm Ollie Davis, and for the first time ever, here are my top 10 wrestlers of all time in autobiographical order. 1999, The Rock. Yes, I'm a basic bitch. I was also 11 years old, so give me a break. I first started watching wrestling out of boredom. Didn't have any older brothers or cousins to introduce it to me. Instead, I had asthma and very bad hay fever. So rather than go outside in the sun, I would sit at home all summer and watch TV. My favourite show on Saturdays was the football chat show Soccer AM. Funnily enough, what the Wrestle Talk TV show was modelled on over 10 years later. And as you did in those times, I saw what was on next. It was an obnoxious, attention-grabbing show called WWF SmackDown, led by an obnoxious, attention-grabbing man called The Rock. Looking back now, I can deconstruct how Rock was the perfect babyface, an optimized mix of character, promo ability, over-the-top showmanship, and sympathetic, if goofy, selling. But as an 11-year-old, I only saw him as a real-life superhero. I idolized him. I would practice his signature taunts in the mirror with both brows like I was doing tiny bicep curls for my head. I ended up living for Saturday mornings because whenever I watched Rocky overcome a seemingly insurmountable group of heels, my asthmatic breathing came a little easier. 2000. This is the year 2000. Kurt Angle. After being pulled in by the sheer gravitational weight of the Rock's ego, it was time for me to find my own up-and-comer to latch onto. I chose a new addition to the WWF roster, the goofy, all-American heel, Kurt Angle, who, luckily, ended up being one of the greatest in-ring wrestlers of all time. I've always liked the bad guys more. Darth Vader, Megabyte from Reboot, Zed from Power Rangers Season 2, and I'd also always been drawn to comedy. So heel Kurt Angle, wearing tiny cowboy hats and singing, "Did you ever know that you're my hero?" to Stone Cold Steve Austin was tailor-made for my preteen tastes. But most importantly, he made me realize what my favorite style of wrestling was. He, along with Jericho and Benoit, established a technical, submission-based foundation in the otherwise superficial in-ring work of the Attitude Era. They showed me that the actual wrestling could matter more than the catchphrases. Angle revealed to me the art. I also have Kurt to thank for bringing me back after my first wrestling crisis. More on that shortly. Also the year 2000. Mick Foley, or Mankind, aka Cactus Jack, also Dude Love. The first band I remember ever truly liking was U2, but it wasn't until I first heard Radiohead where I started to realize what music was to me. What I'm trying to say is The Rock is U2 and Mick Foley is Radiohead. I first became familiar with Foley during his non-wrestling commissioner run. I was intrigued and, to be honest, pretty confused, because Jerry and JR kept talking about this guy with the names Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love. Foley became the first wrestler I had to get into retroactively, which is harder than it is today with your TikToks and your Minecraft. Every birthday or Christmas, I would ask for videos with his craziest stunts on from Silvervision, Deep Cut. My friend had a grimy VHS of his exploding barbed wire deathmatch, which we watched in snuff-like awe. I read his book, which I still have on my desk to this day, signed by the man himself. Foley did more than open my mind. He blew it open with C4 strapped to the turnbuckles. Through him, I discovered the weird, wonderful, and wicked world beyond the WWF, and he showed me that wrestling can be whatever you want it to be, putting the concept of identity through a flaming table. But then suddenly, The Rock left. Foley fully retired, and the WCW-ECW invasion peaked with nothing substantial to follow it, prompting the first wrestling crisis of my life. I wouldn't watch any wrestling for the next 5 years. If you're enjoying this video, please do pile drive that thumbs up button and subscribe to partsFUNknown. We make loads of wrestling lists, wrestling game shows, and our MyGM series. Make sure to enable notifications to always on so you never miss an upload, and it really helps support us here on the channel. 2009, Desmond Wolfe, aka Nigel McGuinness. It wasn't until my first year of university when my best friend, affectionately known as Kenaman Dan, told me that WWE stuff, because it was now called E, was for babies. You want the TNA stuff now, son. You know, that real wrestling stuff with its reverse battle royals. Also, Kurt Angle's just shown up. I know him, I said, and my other favourite, Foley, joined later on. TNA introduced me to Christopher Daniels, Doug Williams, AJ Styles, but it wasn't until 2009 where I fully latched onto a wrestler with the unfiltered love of my pre-teen years, and he was called Desmond Wolfe. Yep. I'm ashamed to say that whenever I see Ring of Honor legend Nigel McGuinness, one of the best wrestlers never to make it to a WWE ring, my mind immediately goes, oh look, it's Desmond Wolfe. His 3-match series with Kurt Angle was wrestling perfection. I actually got to see them wrestle live at a TNA show in London, which would be the greatest match I'd ever seen in person until 2017. Unfortunately, Wolfe's TNA run was over not even a year before it began due to retirement. I'd only just found out about this guy. I needed more. So I started watching his best of DVDs and found my way to a little promotion called ROH. 2010, Kevin Steen. Yeah, that's right, I said Kevin Steen. I liked Kevin Owens before it was cool. 2010 was the second wrestling crisis in my life. I was a WWE-hating TNA diehard, an identity that crumbled when Impact became built around the hotshot upstart Hulk Hogan. Thankfully, WWE had the fantastic Nexus storyline that pulled me back into their weekly TV. A fantastic storyline that was killed dead by John Cena. I could feel myself mentally checking out, just like I did back in 2002. But thankfully, this time, I had a secret weapon. Totally legal torrents of ROH from HDNet, and my new favorite wrestler, Kevin Steen. I never heard someone cut such engagingly naturalistic promos. His in-ring ability was baffling for his body shape. His ROH entrance music was my jam. I was obsessed with his storylines, and his anti-authority stance against Jim Cornette's regime remains one of my favorite periods in wrestling ever. His short-lived prizefighter run in NXT with the first few weeks of his Cena-squashing main roster call-up made me think WWE were finally going to do an indie gimmick right. I consider the Festival of Friendship to be the best in-ring segment of all time. Steen, or Owens to you fake fans, will forever make me disproportionately excited whenever it seems like he's getting pushed. 2011, CM Punk. The first time I ever saw CM Punk, I was in my university bar watching WWE, and one of the guys mentioned Punk was his favourite wrestler. I laughed for hours. This Punk guy wasn't a star. He's tiny. He's got tattoos. Then he did the Straight Edge Society gimmick, and that was good. He sang Happy Birthday to Rey Mysterio's daughter. That was creepy. He cut promos between entries at the Royal Rumble. That was funny. But oddly, the moment I really fell in love with Punk wasn't in a match or a promo. It was him doing commentary while out injured and dunking on Scott. Watch the same Punk commentary compilation video over and over again, howling with laughter every time. And then came the pipe bomb. Punk's pipe bomb promo and subsequent Money in the Bank title win wasn't just a defining moment in wrestling history, it was a defining moment in my life. As an afraid, confused 23-year-old trying to figure out his place in the world, Punk's pipe bomb was the jolt of confident clarity I needed. To this day, I listen to his speech whenever I'm scared to make me brave. CM Punk wasn't suddenly just my favourite ever wrestler, he was my hero, which is a strange thing to say as an adult. And then a decade later, he did that all over again when he debuted for AEW. Even with all his flaws, Punk transcends wrestling for me. He is a constant reminder to stay true to who you are, even when it can cost you everything. 2012, Zack Sabre Jr. Getting more into ROH made me more into indie wrestling in general. I wanted to go watch a show for myself, and because Colt Cabana was advertising his appearance for a new London-based wrestling promotion, I thought I'd go along. The promotion was called Progress, and I'd accidentally joined a British wrestling revolution. While I missed chapter 1 because a girl I was seeing had booked me a birthday getaway to the Cotswolds, we broke up the week after. I didn't miss a show for the next 3 years, because I've found the perfect way to enjoy wrestling. Drunk, with loads of rowdy fans, in a dingy British hall. I went to any indie show I could get to on the train, and I found myself following one man in particular around the country. Sometimes literally when I drove him on an 8-hour round trip to a wrestling show in Hull, the greatest technical wrestler I've ever seen, Zack Sabre Jr. Sabre Jr. became my protagonist in the re-emerging British indie scene, introducing me to a whole new way to enjoy the art and the countless other wrestlers he's faced. Will Ospreay, Noam Dar, a Dutch guy called Tommy End. 2016, the revival / FTR. Being a wrestling YouTuber became my full-time gig in 2016. I had lost my job, so I thought I'd follow my passion, which just so happened to coincide with a terrible creative time for the main roster. Roman Reigns was cutting suffering succotash promos. Pre-split SmackDown was just a repeat of that week's Raw, and the League of Nations was a thing. But I had NXT takeovers, and one was coming to London on the 16th of December 2015, the day before Star Wars The Force Awakens was released, until I saw the Batman on the same day as AEW Revolution in February 2022. That was the greatest 24-hour period of my life. While it took a while, I eventually settled on my favourite act to keep me sane in light of the main roster awfulness. The Revivals Dash Wilder and Scott Dawson, aka FTR's Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood in AEW. Their feuds with American Alpha, DIY, and the Authors of Pain made the tag division the main event scene in NXT. And while the main roster didn't work out for them, their AEW run has been spectacular whenever the promotion actually decides to use them, having 2 classics against the Young Bucks and the Briscoes in Ring of Honor. I've never seen a tag team that can integrate their style so seamlessly against every set of opponents they're booked against. They're a perfect wrestling act. 2017, Tomohiro Ishii. NXT was the best North American promotion between 2015 and 2018, but the best wrestling in the world was happening over in New Japan, with a division that boasted Hiroshi Tanahashi, Kenny Omega, Tetsuya Naito, and Kazuchika Okada. But I'm not choosing any of those guys, because my heart belongs to a dude with no neck. I'd already loved watching Tomohiro Ishii. He changed what I thought wrestling selling should be. Instead of cry and flop around Shawn Michaels style, he did what professional fighters probably would do. Hide the parts that hurt best you can until you collapse in a heap. But it was a drunken Thursday night with Luke Owen and Bethnal Green's famous York Hall that made me realize Ishii is one of my favorite wrestlers ever, because that's where I saw him versus Keith Lee in Rev Pro. Keith Lee was incredible, but it was the pacing, the storytelling, and the Lion's Pride spirit of Ishii overcoming what I thought was physically possible, convincing me that he genuinely couldn't suplex Lee and then hitting one for the finish that provided the match's genius. To this day, it's still the best match I've ever seen live, and having followed Ishii ever since, he seems to do that every other week. 2021, Eddie Kingston. Covering professional wrestling has been my full-time job for 6 years now. It's an odd thing when your hobby becomes your full-time gig. You can no longer just sit back and enjoy it as much as some comments want me to. You've got to hold wrestling to a higher standard as a critic, which makes your entry barrier for new favorites significantly harder. It takes someone very special to break through, and that someone is called Eddie Kingston. I remember the exact moment I realized Eddie Kingston was my favorite wrestler. It was December 2021, and Luke and I were talking about our favorite matches of the year. My top 5 had CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston, Bryan Danielson versus Eddie Kingston, and Miro versus Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston, I realized, made up over half of my top 5 matches that year. It's because behind Kingston's fiery, half-mad eyes lies the most important thing in the fake world of professional wrestling. Something real. Like all the best lies, Kingston painfully builds kayfabe around a very real-life hurt. From the jealous frenemy turned sparkler protector against Jon Moxley, a disappointing execution but one of the best intentioned makeup angles I've ever seen, through the intense "Fight Me" CM Punk promo, Kingston makes me feel a rawness and anger that nobody else does in wrestling. It's like when he performs, I'm connected to him via an open filter into his tortured soul. Also, he's my best friend.
I'm good, man. I'm just texting people that I met Ollie real quick.
That's amazing.
This is, maybe besides Derek Jeter emailing me, this is a highlight.
Let's hear from the man himself, Ollie. CM Punk is a hero of yours, right? But now you've gone on this role of CM Punk is your favorite wrestler, but now you're faced with Eddie Kingston, who is also your favorite wrestler.
I hate CM Punk. Eddie
My man
Kingston's
Ali
my
knows
favorite
what to do.
wrestler.
My man Ali knows what's up. I love it. I love it. I love it. I would fight for you, Ali.
I mean, let's just check on the comments of this video, shall we? But you didn't do the wrestlers in my favorite arbitrary order. That's actually pretty fair. Well, for you, angry commenter, here's my top 5 in actual order as of Tuesday the 22nd of November 2022. Number 5, The Rock. Number 4, Eddie Kingston. Number 3, Kevin Steen/Owens. Number 2, Kurt Angle. Number 1, my favorite wrestler ever, CM Punk. I hate CM Punk. What are your favourite wrestlers of all time? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe to partsFUNknown and enable notifications to always on for loads of new fun wrestling stuff. Like right now. Go over, check out Adam Blompier's 10 favourite wrestlers ever too. Jam that jam.